Hi, everyone. Mrs. Melchatter, biology teacher, and I have your notes on biological macromolecules. This is Unit 2 for our biology classes. So, biological macromolecules are organic molecules. So, what's an organic molecule? Well, simply, it's a molecule that's made up of carbon and hydrogen atoms. So not everything that has carbon is an organic molecule, but organic molecules contain carbon. These are things that were living or once living. So you are organic, but CO2, carbon dioxide, what you breathe out, that's a gas. That's not organic. So today we're going to be talking about 4 classes of macromolecules: the carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And you may have heard of some of these before. So when we talk about macromolecules, we're talking about very large molecules that contain hydrogen, carbon, and sometimes oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. So there's 2 basic kinds of macromolecules that we'll discuss. There's the monomers, which are the single building blocks, like one little piece, like a Lego. And then there's polymers. And a polymer is many monomers put together. So it's a bunch of those little building blocks that are bonded together to make something bigger. Okay, so we have polymers and monomers. So if you had several Legos and you made a structure, that would be a polymer. Can you think of any other polymers and what monomers make it up? Like another analogy would be each individual pearl on a necklace would be a monomer, and the whole necklace would be the polymer. See if you can find another one. Okay, you eat food every day and you frequently see your food labels. On the food labels are 3 out of the 4 macromolecules that are always labeled there. There's the fat. This one doesn't happen to have any. The carbohydrates, which this one has 13 grams, and the protein, which has 9 grams. And we need all of these things for life. So let's start with the carbohydrates. Those consist mostly of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They are our main source of energy for our body. These are the simple sugars, like monosaccharides, mono meaning one, saccharide is sugar, like glucose, galactose, fructose. Okay. And again, they contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Glucose is C6H12O6, and you'll notice it's in a ratio of 1 carbon to 2 hydrogens to 1 oxygen. Okay. Sometimes we put those monomers, those simple sugars, monosaccharides, together to make a bigger sugar or a polysaccharide. We call those complex carbohydrates. These our bodies are going to use, and plant bodies, for long-term storage. And each polysaccharide, many sugar, is made up of monosaccharides, simple sugars. So we've got the monomer and polymer again. This pictured here is a part, just a very small little part of the polymer starch, which you'll find in plants. Animals have glycogen, which is another kind of carbohydrate. So starches are going to be found in things like your grains, your wheat, corn, rice, oats, and barley, and then your potatoes and other tubers. And this is kind of what it looks like, but it's a lot bigger. Okay, now we're moving on to our second macromolecule, lipids, otherwise known as fats. They contain mostly carbon, hydrogen, and a little bit of oxygen. Lipids are super important for all bodies, all living organisms. They waterproof surfaces, like this plant here. They insulate bodies, like this fat squirrel. They are steroids. They provide us with energy, and they also cushion our organs and joints. So super important in lots of functions. And one of the biggest things is that all of your cells have a cell membrane. Okay, we talked about all living things are made of cells in Unit 1. Well, all of our cells have a cell membrane. And that cell membrane is made up of a phospholipid. This is what that looks like. So these little fats down here these are fatty tails, and that's going to help create space between the outside of the cell and the inside of the cell. And it's also going to allow only certain molecules to be able to get into our cells because we don't want everything to be able to go through them. So we call that semi-permeable because it only allows certain things to go through. So lipids are super important in that case too. Then we have our third class of macromolecules. These are our proteins. These are made up of mostly carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen again, our CHO, and of course nitrogen, and then some sulfur. So proteins are probably the most diverse group of macromolecules that are out there. They are major structural molecules. They are the basis of a lot of the things that our body is built from. They have functions in growth and repair of our muscles, ligaments, tendons, bone, hair, skin, nails. They make up our antibodies. They actually make up enzymes, and like in an animal that is venomous, they're going to make up the toxins that make that venom, and a whole bunch of other jobs that we'll learn about later. In fact, all cell membranes also have proteins in them, proteins that help transport molecules through the cell membrane and proteins that mark or tag what that cell is, to say like this is a heart cell or this is a liver cell. This is your cell. We can find proteins in meats and eggs and dairy, but we can also find proteins in, that should say animal products. We can also find proteins in fruits, nuts, and grains. Protein is in the form of keratin in our hair, skin, and nails. And this is a pretty cool microscopic look of what our skin would look like and our nails. Ugh. Okay, and then our final group of macromolecules are the nucleic acids. These are made up mostly of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and now we get the P in the chomp, the phosphorus. Okay. There are two major kinds of nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. You've probably heard of these before. DNA is made up of small parts, those monomers that are called nucleotides. There's 3 parts to each nucleotide. There's a phosphate group, a 5-carbon sugar, and then what we call a nitrogenous base, or a base that contains nitrogen. And you can see those N symbols in there. So we know that it contains nitrogen. Okay. There are 4 different kinds of nucleotides in DNA. And then we have one more that would be found in RNA. So those are A, T, G, C, and U. You may remember hearing about those in other classes, and we'll get to talk about those more later in other units. But for right now, just remember a nucleotide monomer, the single one, has a phosphate, a sugar, and a base. When we put a bunch of those nucleotides together, we get the polymer of DNA or RNA. And there are some differences between DNA and RNA, and we will get to those in an upcoming unit. But right now, DNA has 2 strands and RNA has 1. And if you remember that, and remember that DNA is contained in the nucleus of our cells, we'll be good. Now, we've talked a lot about different macromolecules, and we've said that some are found in the foods that we eat, those lipids, fats, and carbohydrates. Nucleic acids are the DNA and RNA. They're going to be found in the nucleus of the things that we eat. Excuse my dog. But we're not going to take those in directly from the food. You're never going to see nucleic acids on the food labels that we eat. So I hope you enjoyed this video and your Amoeba Sisters work, and let us know if you have any questions. Have a good day.